Well, welcome to Stories of Hope. And now I'm chatting with Ariadne. That's how I say your name, right?
Yep. Mhm.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, welcome. And you can share. Now I'm just going to pass it over to you.
Okay. Yeah. I guess I'll share first like a little bit about my like kind of backstory before I found you and the three principles. So I in terms of like mental health and anxiety, I have always been kind of like an anxious person. Like I was a very anxious kid. I had a lot of concerns about when I first started following you and you had shared a little bit about fearing that like your parents were going to die and those kinds of things that like really resonated with me because I had that exact same thing. Like my parents would go out to dinner and I would be like, okay, they're not going to come back. So that was kind of like my childhood. I was very, it was, it was a good childhood, but I was very anxious. And then I started having panic attacks when I was about 18 or 19. And I didn't really know what they were at first, but my mom and my uncle also have like been diagnosed with panic disorder. And so after kind of like talking to my mom and all of that, I kind of learned what they were. Um, and so I ended up going to my doctor and getting on an antidepressant, which now looking back, I wish that I had started out with therapy or something instead of going straight to medication, just because like I wasn't really dealing with the underlying like the ways that I was thinking and those kinds of things. But I did that and it did help. The medication did help. But I kept having panic attacks and I would have um every few years I'd have what I would call like an episode where I would be so anxious that I was like non-functioning for a couple of weeks or even like a month. And usually somewhere in there was some kind of like something to do with medication. So either I was like not taking anything and I would start medication or I was switching medication or whatever. Um, and so that had been going on. So since I was like 18 and I'm 28 now, so like 10 years of dealing with anxiety and it's kind of changed and I've had anxiety in different ways and my panic attacks have changed. So I guess, yeah, that's just like my background. And there was a lot of um, because I have family members who have dealt with this, a lot of thoughts of like, this isn't going to change. You're just going to have to figure out how to deal with it. And even when like I went to a therapist who told me, yeah, it's possible to stop having, not, non-functioning anxiety or high-end anxiety. I didn't really believe it because I was getting a lot from other sources, especially like my family, that, this is just something that you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life. Um, and so that was really hard, obviously. Like I felt like pretty hopeless with, okay, this isn't going to get better. I'm just going to have to figure out how to deal with it. Um, and then I found you on TikTok. Must have been probably well, it's January now, so like the year before last. Um, and then I started following you on Instagram, and just kind of the way that you talked about how like where anxiety comes from, and it being, coming from yourself rather than coming from some kind of outside source or some kind of like, brain chemistry problem or like mom has been convinced that because she was very anxious during her pregnancy with me, that that's what caused my anxiety. And she had said that to me multiple times. And so, of course, to myself, I'm like, okay, well, that just means my brain's messed up and I'm like never gonna be better. And she carries a lot of guilt around about that, which in turn makes me feel kind of bad. Like, I don't want her to feel guilty. She didn't do anything wrong. Um, and so when I found you and, started watching your videos and just this like new idea of it's not it's not inevitable. It is, you can get better. And just listening to you talk about your story of how you got better, and then, other people's stories about how they got better, and learning a little bit more about the three principles. It really, like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's hard to explain. Like, it's not just that it resonated with me. It's like internally, deep down, I was like, this is the truth. Like, I could feel that it was true, and not, it wasn't just like, you convinced me that it was true. It was like, yes, this is something I feel like I've known forever, but there have been all of these other sources along with my own thinking telling me that I'm wrong. So it's kind of like I guess my wisdom came out and said, like, yes, this is right. So I kept listening to you and following you, and then also listening to Dr. Pettit, which I think that was kind of helpful for me, just learning a little bit more about like the science behind, because he talks about like the science behind panic attacks, and the science behind anxiety, and like the physical feelings. So that was really helpful, because I have a very like logical brain. So I think like something that you've experienced as well is like trying to always researching things and over analyzing things. So being able to hear kind of that point of view of like, this is how a panic attack actually works. Like, a big turning point for me was hearing him talk about how adrenaline only lasts in your body for a certain amount of time. It's like up to 15 minutes or something. So anything beyond that is your thinking and your feeling. It's not, the physical like hormone that's produced in your body. And after I learned that, I was like, yeah, that makes sense, because when I have panic attacks, sometimes I feel like it lasts for hours, but it's really, kind of comes in waves. And so I'll get that first wave, and then the wave will go down, but I keep thinking about it, and I keep kind of, replaying it and going down that rabbit hole of like, well, what if this never stops? What if I never get better? What if? And then it comes back. So it's not like I'm just constantly having a panic attack for 2 hours. It's my thinking that is kind of continuing that. So that was, I think, one of the first like big kind of aha moments for me. And then as I like continued to learn and listen to you, and then listen to other people in the three principles, I had started trying to read Sid's book, The Missing Link, when I first started following you, I think. And at that point, I could not understand it. Like, I was reading it and I was like, I don't even know what he's saying. I don't understand this at all. So it took me a little bit before, I kind of stopped reading it, and I just kept watching videos and learning. And then after a few months, I just decided to start, watching his videos again, and then reading the books. And all of a sudden, I understood it. Like, all of a sudden it made sense, where it through, a couple of months ago before had not made any sense at all. So that was kind of another breakthrough. And then I think one of the biggest things that has changed for me is that I still have had panic attacks. That's not something at this point that has gone away yet, which I'm okay with that. It's a process. It's not just like one moment where all of a sudden you feel better forever. So I do have less of them. And something that I noticed that kind of like, it almost like sneaked up on me, I didn't notice that it was happening, was I don't fight them anymore. So like, when they come up, instead of going, okay, I'm going to do these techniques, and I'm going to watch a comfort show, and I'm going to take my medication, and I'm going to, do all these things, it's like, it kind of comes up and I'm like, okay, this is uncomfortable, but it's okay to be uncomfortable. And I trust myself that I can get through this. And I trust myself that, it's not going to last forever and it'll be okay. Um, and that like trust in myself was huge and not something that I had before. It was always like feeling like I was fighting against myself. Um, and inevitably they pass much quicker than they did before, without having to take medication or not that I'm not against medication at all, but without having to, without having to do anything, kind of like what you say, like you don't have to do anything. I just kind of like pay attention to the TV or whatever, just something that, so I'm just not sitting there thinking and thinking. Um, but they have definitely gotten less in intensity and less in length, and just that feeling of like the day that I realized that they were passing quicker, and it was because I trusted myself and knew that like I've always gotten through this, and I will continue to get through it, was like a huge insight for me. Um, so yeah, so that was kind of long, but that's kind of my journey so far.
Mm, I love it. I did feel like it was too long. I thought it was perfect. So many things resonated with me, but what kind of like really lit me up was when it felt like truth that you were like, I'm
Mhm.
not broken, and how cool is it that even though you had heard this is something you're always going to deal with, this is something you're going to experience, like that might have felt uncomfortable and unpleasant, but it didn't feel like the truth.
Mhm.
And I think what I love about this conversation is it's so simple and it's so true. And for a lot of people, it's like, oh, like it's kind of what so many of us were searching for.
Yeah.
And I love that you said these things that you realized, which is true for human beings, that our experience is meant to flow and it does so
Mhm.
much. Like we can trust in ourselves and in experience. Um, I think almost everybody's brought up Dr. Pettit too. So I get so excited because he's one of my, and he's probably like my main mentor, and I think there's everybody, what they share is so valid, but there was something about, oh, he's a doctor and this is a psychiatrist and here's
Yes.
this is the science, and he does such a great job, I think, of merging science and spirituality. Like, okay, I'm going to feed your
Mhm.
intellect with the science and let's feed your kind of your soul, your whatever, with some of the, which also spirituality is just truth in terms of our their spiritual experiences beings.
Right.
um and I love that you said that you couldn't understand Sid at first, and I think we talked about that when we did the book club, because I
Yeah.
there, so if people are listening, like come back to Sid. And if this
Yes.
thing we're talking about Sid Banks, who's the founder of the three principles. But I just think it's so interesting how our state of mind can impact. Because when I first listened to him, I was like, no way.
Yeah.
I was like, what is he even saying? I didn't even try to read his books at first, though, like, because
Hmm.
listen to him, people would reference him. And I was like, let me check out this guy. And I was like, what is this? And then I
Yeah.
went back and I heard him, just as you said. Um,
Yeah. And it's so interesting because it's not like in that interim between when I first read or listened to him and when I went back, it's not like I had someone sit and explain to me what he was saying, because like I had already watched your videos where you kind of explain the principles and the basics of it, and um I guess intellectually understood that. So it's not like all of a sudden, I did all this digging in the meantime to figure out what he was saying. It just kind of happened, which is really interesting. Like he's saying the exact same thing, but all of a sudden I got it.
yeah. I still don't know if I could know, like, I don't know what Sid's saying. I just am in a more feeling that I get it. I
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just understand also about 50% of what he says. But I know,
Yeah.
I think before when I would listen, I was so lost that it would ignite more confused, anxious thinking. And now I'm okay. I'm at peace just to listen. And sometimes I'm like, I'm totally get it. Sometimes it's above my head and I'm totally okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because when I first read or tried to read the book, I was like, this is supposed to be helpful, but I don't understand. Why am I not understanding? Is there something wrong with me that I'm not understanding? So obviously still in that kind of loop of like intellectual thinking and trying to find something that would make me feel better. Um, which is something I went through as well, was just like uh over researching and spending too much time watching videos and reading and looking into the principles with the idea of this is going to make me feel better. And it really wasn't until I slowed down and started to get curious. Like it wasn't, okay, I'm going to watch this because maybe this will be the thing that'll stop my panic attacks. It was, this is a really, interesting idea, this whole three principles idea. And I want to learn more about it.
Yeah.
And that's when it really started to be impactful.
Yeah. I absolutely love that you brought that up because I've heard that from a lot of people. And I was just talking to somebody yesterday and I was like, because she kept saying, I know everything. And she does. And I was like, I think you don't need to, I often don't give advice, but it was like, she's watched so much stuff. And that's actually what Sarah said, that at first when she, found my videos and the community, she watched all of it. And then she actually went back and watched it from a more curious, slow point. And
Mm,
not that we have to say I'm guilty, but that's, actually I did the same. It's like I'd kind of be obsessed with learning, but it was like, and I think that's why I felt like I didn't have time for sit, because I was like, he's not talking about
mhm.
anxiety. He's not talking about panic, although he does, but I was like, he's not telling me what I need to fix me. Uh,
Right.
but I still heard something, but my understanding deepened so much, just as when it was just like from curiosity, from just listening rather than listening of like, what am I going to hear to fix me and to feel better? Um,
Right.
so if someone's listening and you're there, that's okay, because we were there and so many people, and it's like it's so okay to be in that place. You don't have
Mhm.
to force yourself to go to curiosity. You'll get there. Um, and it's when we're listening from a relaxed state that, we kind of stop trying, we just let go.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why I think, and I think you've talked about this before, but um, for me, I did have to use at first some techniques, and I was on antidepressant. Well, I still am, but I was on antidepressants, and like there shouldn't be any guilt about needing or wanting to use something like that to get to that point where you can be, oh, relaxed enough to kind of listen. Because it definitely took me a little bit to get to that point, just because I had spiraled myself into so much of like an anxiety muddle that there was no way that any of that feeling was getting through to me at that point.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and it took a little bit, and I was impatient at first too. I was like, well, this isn't helping me, right now. So, um, and then all of a sudden, a few months later, I realized that it was helping, and it had just kind of sneaked up on me, which was um really great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I know that you've said the ways that you've felt like you've recognized that it's been helpful, that I kind of, that seeing a big thing, it sounds like realizing you're not broken and trusting in yourself, and also trusting maybe in that no experience is permanent, that trusting in like the nature, the temporary nature of all experiences, and definitely the experience of a panic attack. Have you noticed
Mhm.
other things that being in this conversation or this understanding has been helpful?
Yeah, it's been really helpful in my relationships. Actually, all of my relationships, like off the top of my head that I can think of, with my relationship with my husband, my relationship with my mom, which has gone through a lot in the last year or so, my relationship with my best friends. Um, And I think a lot of it is this sense of like talking about not having judgment. And that, doesn't mean that you're going to let people walk all over you or treat you badly, but when it's not kind of affecting you in a really negative way, being okay with, like a few months ago, or a couple of months ago, my mom and I got into kind of I'd say like an argument, and we didn't talk for a little bit. And now, we're talking again and everything's fine. But I think before I would have really like wanted to continue that argument until either she admitted that I was right, or like we stopped talking, or, but I was okay with, I know that she's not doing these things to hurt me. She's doing these things because of the way that she's thinking, and because of, her own things that she's going through. And so I don't know how to explain it, like being able to see that people are doing things for reasons outside of you, like the way that people treat you 99% of the time has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them and the way that they're processing things, and the way that they're going through things. And it just allows so much more freedom, I think, for me to be able to say, okay, I might not agree with what they did or what they said. And maybe I still want to say, hey, I don't appreciate that you said that, but not being angry about it, I guess, is one of the biggest changes. And then also being able to kind of like in therapy, or a therapist, like talk to my friends and family about what they're going through without taking those things on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's been really, especially with like a couple of my best friends, that's been a big thing that we have all had a very difficult few years. And so a lot of times we will just kind of like dump on each other, which is also something that I don't feel like I'm having to do as much anymore. But also when they need to talk to me about something, I'm able to do that without feeling like that is an extra weight on my shoulders, I guess.
Yeah. What do you think made that possible? Because someone just posted in the community, they said they're out of what they called like an anxiety haze. They're like, okay, I'm on the other side. My anxiety's, that more, as you could kind of like really impactful anxiety. But they realize that a lot of close people around them are suffering. And sometimes they find themselves feeling, I'm not using maybe their exact words, but feeling burdened by that, and feeling like then okay, now they're not worrying about themselves. They're not experiencing anxiety, but then sometimes they feel anxiety thinking about other people. What do you think was helpful for you of not um, to obviously like care, but not have it negatively impact you?
Yeah. I think like I'm definitely not, 100%. There are definitely still things that, I kind of take on, but um I think part of that is also understanding, um, again, with that, like no judgment. So if my friend is telling me, oh my gosh, this person did this to me, I'm not also being that person did this, or being angry at that person. Because as much as obviously I don't want people to hurt my friends or hurt my family, I can see it as, well, I don't know what's going on in that person's life. I don't know, how they're processing things. So that's been helpful. And then I think also I have talked to a few people about not the three principles specifically, but just kind of that the general like way of thinking and way of looking at things, which has opened them up a little more because I have specifically a couple of friends that are, I want to say, just like I was before, very ingrained in the trauma culture. Like, I am this way because I went through this as a child. I am this way because my mom did this. And I am completely understanding of that because I was that way before as well. Um, and I understand that way of thinking, but I have kind of had conversations with them about just like different ways of thinking and understanding that you are not your past, and you know, you can move on from those things. And so I think that's been helpful too. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so I don't know if that made sense, but
It made a lot of sense. And what I know of people, practitioners in the three principles community, they have less burnout rate because also what I'm wondering might be there is like we know your friends are humans, and we start to feel
yes.
more hopeful about the human experience and their resiliency. And so because when I don't think we know, we can get really worried. At least like it helps me, I think, not burn out also because I'm having really hopeful conversations, but we are kind of pointing to people's wisdom and common sense and mental health and mental well-being. And it's a really hopeful, positive conversation. And so I think even knowing that when you're listening, you also can have compassion, but not think people are broken or stuck or, and I think for me, it's very, um, like I feel so great and kind of uplifted by almost all my conversations that I'm having with people. And even if like close people, if they're going through something, I just feel so grounded in like the resiliency of the human spirit that it doesn't drag me down into like, um, I don't know. Yeah. So I think that was really helpful. Also, I love that you brought in the non-judgment. Um, yeah, that was it. I noticed I came into the three principles conversation because of like severe panic attacks and driving anxiety. And one of the biggest things is it's an impact on my relationships. But I
Yeah.
didn't come in for that. But I love that you brought that up because there's these unexpected benefits of more just, that's what's so is like exciting because also, yes, techniques definitely have their place and so helpful if quiets the mind. Um, but what we're talking about is like the truth of the human experience. And so, yeah, it can be helpful for our anxiety and panic and mental health, but also everything, and it's like,
Yeah.
it goes so deep um, that it just really can positively impact all areas of our life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think I don't remember if it was you that said it or somebody else, but um I remember hearing at one point during a video that I was watching, someone said judgment feels unsafe to your brain, which totally makes sense to me because if we're judging someone on, or if I'm judging someone on, oh, they're just a terrible person, then then to your brain, that's an unsafe person to be around because they're just a bad person, not a person who might be doing things that you wouldn't do with the way, because of the way that they're thinking or with the way that they're thinking. Um, but yeah, so that was kind of a big thing for me, and also just something that was good for me to work on in general, because I definitely did have a lot of judgmental thinking, not just towards myself, but towards other people. Um, yeah, but also what you said about feeling hopeful, I think is what I was trying to get at without being able to put it into words, is like exactly that feeling like, yes, my friend might be going through something right now, but I have hope and to me, knowledge that that doesn't mean that they're broken, and they will be okay. And if I can, if they're willing to talk to me about those things, and if they ask for my advice and I can tell them a little bit about, this other way of thinking, then that's great. And if not, then that's okay too. And they'll still be okay, I think is the
Yeah.
biggest thing.
Yeah. I love that. Hannah Studley was who taught me, like, really helped my understanding go deeper about judgment, and perfectionism. And I don't know if it was that, like, I found the quote because from her book, Painless, I think this is the quote. It said, the brain interprets perfectionistic, judgmental thinking. If everyone just behaved, ourselves included, then we'd all be better off. And so our brain thinks that that is danger. And what drives us crazy about ourselves and others affects our nervous system. And to me, also, I don't think we ever have to stop having judgmental thoughts, but what's helpful is when we can see them as not truth. We can just notice them without judgment of our, like, because it's what to me, it's not having one judgmental thought. It's staying in judgment and kind of feeding that fire. But because it's really normal, I think, to judge ourselves. And, some of it is the brain's trying to be like, good, bad, let's put it in a box. And then when we see it, it's like, we don't have to get involved in that judgmental thinking. We don't have to stay there. We can see our brain judging or trying to be perfect or saying, and then notice that. And to me, the noticing kind of shines a light on it, and then it just falls away. But that's been, I think, I can't remember when I read Hannah's book, like, I think 2 years ago, I felt like I had a year of noticing my judgmental thinking, but without judgment, like just getting curious of all the ways it would pop up, and just really like a new level of peace and ease and living in a feeling of love, but not in a perfect way. Like, I remember when I first read a book, this was like, whatever, 10 years ago or more, because I was a school psychologist, and it was about how good it was not to complain. And it was like 30 days of no complaining. And I would do these things. That's it. I'm going to not complain, and that's going to change my life. And I remember coming to my colleague once and being like, I'm going to do it. I'm doing a no complaining 30 days. And she's like, get the fuck out of here with that. Like, it's like I felt like I needed to make it. And until coming to the principles, I would do these things and be like, this is it. This is, and I want to make it a technique. And this was just more just noticing, and just so much simpler about that. But it's like, or I'll notice if my brain judges and I see it going there, and I choose not to, like, I just kind of let that thought go. But it's been so much. I love that you also was like, not taking it so personally is what I felt like from you too. And when you were talking about your mom also, to me, it felt like when I was, and it still happens, sometimes I'm at a crossroads. Oh, I could do this. Or I also could do this way. And it's like,
yeah. And it feels, aside from everything else, it feels so much better to not take things personally, not be judgmental. And I think before, I had a lot of like, okay, I'm mad at this person, and I don't want to be mad at them, but I don't know what else to do because I'm supposed to be mad at them, right? Like, everything says that if someone does something that you don't like or is rude to you or whatever, you're supposed to be mad at them.
Yeah.
And now it can just be like, yeah, we might need to have a conversation about, maybe they didn't even notice. And that is something that I've definitely noticed in like my friendships. And at this point, the friends that I have who are my best friends we're all really big on communication. So if something happens, sometimes, and actually the majority of the time, the other person doesn't even notice that it's something that they did. And so, like, instead of jumping right to, I'm mad at you, you obviously did that on purpose, you hurt my feelings, that was terrible. It's, maybe they didn't notice, or maybe they didn't think that it would upset you, or, not, not immediately jumping to judgment and taking it personally.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you said how good it feels. Because when we use our feelings as guides, it feels so good. Yeah, sometimes anger can be a temptation, like, ugh, but then when I love that you're just effortlessly seeing other perspectives and, also we just get onto ourselves and get over ourselves. Like,
Yeah.
it's been really, really life-changing in my relationship. Or for me to be, I've been in the three principles conversation in this whole relationship, but even it's been evolving for me of like I noticed, and I don't think I would have been aware how personally I would take things, and I would hurt my own feelings, and I would make up these stories, and like it's these unexpected gifts that are way more than just anxiety and panic.
Yeah.
But also the bigger things of knowing we're not broken and trust in ourselves and knowing nobody's broken.
Hmm.
Yeah. Is there
Having that hope is such a like big, um because I don't feel like, and I'm sure this is not true for all therapists, this is not true for all psychologists, but there is not a lot of hope in general in the current field of psychology. It's just, you've got this diagnosis and now you're stuck.
Yeah, yeah. I know. And so that's what I wanted it to be, stories of hope. And also I
Yeah.
think sometimes, and I'm not saying that, we're both talking about things, taking their time. It's not, but I think also sometimes people are like, it's going to be hard work and you're going to be uncomfortable. And kind of sometimes healing can feel really daunting. Like,
Hmm.
um, and I'm curious if you can, what your experience of being in this conversation, has been maybe just in general or in comparison with other things other like, not that it's because if three principles are happening, they're not a method, they're just simple
Right.
but you
Yeah.
know what I mean, because sometimes with EMDR or exposure therapy or kind of like sometimes people think it's going to be this like hard press, like, and it's really hard. um and I'm wondering if you can speak to your experience in this conversation.
Yeah. So interesting, because I was actually doing EMDR for a while. I haven't done it now. And um, not gonna like say anybody should or shouldn't do it. For me, my experience was it was helpful, and I'm sure there are reasons why it was helpful, but it was also very hard. And it brought up, as it's supposed to, it brings up a lot of the past and just, reprocessing things. Um, Whereas with with like the three principles and this conversation, it doesn't feel hard. It feels exciting. It feels, like we said, like hopeful. It's it's fun for me, honestly, to kind of learn and just have all these insights. And like insights are good things. They're exciting. They're like these aha moments of, oh my gosh, this like clicked all of a sudden. So it definitely does not feel hard. And I think part of the reason for that, at least for me, is because I think when we talk about, people talk about healing from trauma or healing from, um, uh, mental health issue, you're thinking of kind of fixing the past or fixing what's already happened. And this isn't that, because you can't fix the past. You can't go back and fix something that's already happened. It's about letting that be and moving forward. And you're not going to be able to erase the past, nor I think would you want to, because even if there are things that were uncomfortable or quote unquote bad, it's part of your past and it's part of what makes you who you are. but we're not trying to go back and fix something that is literally physically impossible to fix. You can't go back and change a memory. You can't, you can't change the past. So I think that's like the biggest difference is instead of trying to do that, you are learning how to just enjoy the present, which is not, I think, something that like in, years of therapy and years of trying to control the anxiety that I was having. Like that's not something that I was doing, was trying to just enjoy the present. It was always, okay, well, these things happen, so we got to go back and fix them, or we got to process them, or we got to talk about them, which of course is just bringing them up even more. So.
I love that. Like I've never really heard it that in a way, like we're just trying to enjoy the present, it's just, and I think everybody is so well intentioned. So, I mean, I'm not gonna, I think every mental health professional gets into their profession because they want to help and they want to help people enjoy the present moment. I think that's probably everybody's goal because that's what we're all wanting. We want to be happy. We want to be content. We want to enjoy the moment, and and this is the way to do it to me that feels exciting, that I love that it's enjoyable because it's enjoyable for me. That's why I made it my career. Cause it's like, it just, human beings are interesting. But when also I think what to me is a little bit different is we're learning about human beings. So we kind of zoom out, we're focusing on the human experience, not our personal experience, which is sure it can, there is a part of, we're talking about the person, but it's about the human experience. And so it's zoomed out. It's so helpful. We're not taking it so personally. And I think it's a way that people sometimes more effortlessly make peace with the past. And they realize the past, good or bad, is over, and they either learn from it and move on or it's, trauma isn't something I specialize in, but it's, I think anybody that's experienced anxiety and panic has also experienced trauma, but there's, the big T and the little T, but this is such a hopeful conversation for trauma as well, or anything, and a lot of my colleagues, that's their specialties, but I've definitely, it's such a beautiful conversation to be in. Yeah. Was there anything that you wish people knew or something that you wish you knew a few years ago that you want to, I don't know, kind of parting words?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing obviously is what this conversation is about, which is hope, and that there is hope. And that was also really impactful for me, was listening to other people's stories. Dr. Pettit did his Stories of Hope series. So just kind of hearing from people that have gotten better and kind of have gotten through those difficult parts. And then I think being patient is something that, like, that was really hard for me. And not, and I know it's easier said than done. Like I know because I did it, but not, like we talked about, not looking at it as this is going to cure anxiety, partially because anxiety is something that we're always going to deal with. It not in a negative way. It's one of our emotions. But then also, when you're looking at that as, this is gonna make me feel better, you're looking for something and you're not listening, I feel like, which is what I struggle with. So just let it be fun, and it is fun, find someone like you. I love watching your videos and listening to your podcasts. Find someone that you really enjoy listening to and that you resonate with, and and do it that way is like an enjoyable, you know, I would do like, I would sit, you know, after work, I would sit down by my fireplace. I'd turn my fire on and have some tea and watch some videos. And like, that was really enjoyable for me. Um, yeah.
I love that. I love that. Because it's like that patience, and also you were in a good feeling, and I think
Mhm.
really, if you let your feelings be your guide, like if you're listening to someone and you're feeling hopeful and you're feeling curious, but I also love in your story because you and I both, and so many people listened like we were trying
Yeah.
to, and we, just like Richard in Second Chance by Sid Banks, like, Richard was asking all these questions and trying to get it intellectually, and he still had
Mhm.
insights. And so you were trying to fix yourself. I was trying to fix myself. Even when we first came into the principles, we still had insights. And then we got
Yes.
a second chance to listen. So if someone's listening and they're like, oh shit, I've been really
Yeah.
trying to fix myself and obsessively, this is, they could be like, this is the fourth podcast of Lily's that I've listened to. That's okay. That's okay. That's,
Yeah.
we can just see ourselves as this lovable mess. These are these,
Yeah.
we're so human that we're thinking, and then we might get to have a tap on the shoulder to slow down and listen curiously, or listen. Oh, just listen, but really you can't get it wrong. And so many of us come in really strong. Um,
Hmm.
and then we get to the little refresh, and that's okay. But how it feels to me also, it's this lifelong journey of being human, and not that someone needs to be in the three
Hmm.
principles conversation for their life, but as we're talking about, there's insights to be had around our mental health, but then we see things around just relationships and judgment, and it's just a beautiful conversation to me about our human experience. And we don't need to rush that, because it's really, Dr. Pettit was the one that said it's the journey, not the destination. And I
Yeah.
think when I see that, I'm excited to be on this journey, and there's no rush for me. And I'm still get caught up, and sometimes I'm tempted by anxious thinking, and then I get to remember, and and it's like I think I'm very so patient now, eh, compared to how I was 6 years ago. Like, I noticed that I had some anxious thinking about my business, like, and I noticed it months ago or something. And I don't need it to be like, oh my God, now it's got to fall away quickly. And
Yeah.
it's slowly like, oh, and it just was a habit. And it's slowly having, sometimes I have the same insights, because some people are like, well, I had that insight. I have the same insight sometimes over and over, and more realizations, and when it can just be fun to be in it.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, the first insight that I had, which I would say is still probably the most impactful ones that I had, was I just had this, and I think you and I talked about this, this insight of just like being and feeling connected to everything, to nature, you know, just like seeing every tree as like an individual being. And just, it was this just crazy feeling of like, the world is so much bigger than me, but in a good way.
Yeah.
And I had that insight when I was in that, like, okay, I have to watch this video today. I have to like, so it's not impossible. And it's like you said, yeah, you're not gonna not learn anything or have insights or make any progress if you're in that headspace, because I know it's hard to get out of. Um, yeah.
Yeah. But maybe just being in the conversation allows us to fall out of that headspace without trying. Maybe
Hmm.
for so many of us, we've been so used to trying to fix ourselves and working really hard that, of course, we're going to bring that same energy to the three principles. But I love that
Yeah.
we still have insights even in that kind of searching, trying energy. And then we just naturally kind of maybe settle down more and listen more curiously, and because our understanding continues to deepen, our well-being continues to rise, and we hear things differently, and so however people are listening is fine. It's so
Hmm.
fun, you know.
Yeah.
I
It'll
think
happen, or at least it did for me. It'll happen when you least expect it to, and you won't notice.
exactly. Because sometimes it's exactly what we said. Sometimes it's like, oh, I understand Sid now, or I am doing this differently and I didn't try hard at that, and that's where I think
Mhm.
it's, I have some people that sometimes are still like, okay, so when should I practice driving and when should I do these things, because they were so used to it. And I'm like, just listen, and they'll find themselves sometimes just driving and feeling like they could get on the freeway or feeling like they could do a left-hand turn. And they're like, wait, where'd that come from? Or
Mhm.
sometimes if they haven't driven, volunteering to go out and get the eggs. And they're like, I didn't force myself to do that. Like,
Yeah.
where'd that come from? Well, this has been so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story,
Yeah. Yeah,
having
of
this
course.
conversation. And I so appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Well, I'll stop recording and then we'll say bye. Okay.
Okay.